Kilcoursey, the Unsolved Murder of Father Niall Molloy. On the evening of Sunday, the 7th of July, 1985, three good friends, Richard Flynn, his wife Teresa, and Father Niall Molloy shared drinks together in the master bedroom of the Flynn's home, Kilcoursey House, just outside Clara, County Offaly. Before sunrise the following morning, Father Niall Molloy would lie dead. The culprit made a full admission. However, the Molloy family's 40-year search for truth and justice had only just begun. In this episode, the Garda Commissioner announces a cold case review of Father Niall's death. However, the cold case team is tasked only with revisiting the original 1985 investigation. Witnesses who were never previously approached come forward, offering new statements to the Gardaí, including a prominent member of the Flynn family. Episode 6. The Cold Case Review. Crime correspondent for the Sunday Independent, Veronica Gearan, would write a series of articles on organised crime in Ireland, specifically focusing on the criminal gangs operating in and around Dublin. Her article on Martin Cahill's deal with Gardaí over Father Niall's file and Justice Rowe allegedly admitting he knew the Flynns would cause outrage. Veronica had contacted Justice Rowe to ask for comment while she was researching the article. When she began to explain why she was calling, the judge would tell her, "As you know, I was judge in the trial of Richard Flynn, so it would be inappropriate of me to comment in any way about it. That case is dead and buried. I have nothing to say." Veronica asked Justice Rowe if he was willing to explain the letter he sent to the DPP before Richard Flynn had even been charged with manslaughter and assault. Justice Rowe would not discuss the letter or how well he knew the Flynns and Father Niall. He would only offer, "They were lovely people, all of them. God bless them all." Veronica persisted, however, and asked Justice Rowe about the second letter he sent to the DPP after the trial, which was in essence an explanation as to how and why he reached his decision. He told Veronica that, "I got a terrible time from the media and the press then. It was awful. Now I have nothing else to say." On the back of the article, the Molloy family wrote to the Garda Commissioner, Patrick Culligan. They asked the Garda Commissioner to confirm if the allegation Veronica Gearan had made was true. Had the Gardaí been blackmailed by the General into releasing his accomplice by using Father Niall's stolen file? The Molloys sent letter after letter to Garda headquarters asking if the Gardaí denied these allegations. The Garda Commissioner would not respond to any of the letters. The Molloys heard nothing. In 2011, crime correspondent for the Sunday World, Paul Williams, while conducting research for his book on the General, would corroborate and verify the allegations Veronica made in 1994 in relation to the Gardaí being blackmailed. By the mid-1990s, the Church's grip on Irish society had begun to slip. Congregation sizes decreased, as would the number of new priests being ordained. As Ireland began to enter the years known as the Celtic Tiger, religious devotion was being replaced by a devotion to economic prosperity. Clerical scandals that began to emerge would test the faith of churchgoers. One clerical abuse scandal involving Father Brendan Smith would also contribute to the collapse of the Fianna Fáil Labour Party coalition government. In 1991, it became known that Smith, a suspected paedophile, had absconded from Northern Ireland to the Republic of Ireland. The RUC, the police force of Northern Ireland, knew of his whereabouts and in 1993 applied for his extradition back to Belfast to stand trial. The extradition process involved the RUC lodging a formal request with the Irish Attorney General, Mr. Harry Wheelahan. Since the establishment of the Irish state, a tradition existed of Irish authorities stonewalling the RUC over extradition requests and vice versa. For a long period of time, nothing happened. In October 1994, UTV aired a documentary about Smith which was explosive. As well as outlining the allegations of abuse, the programme alleged the Irish Attorney General had deliberately stalled Father Smith's extradition to Northern Ireland. The AG denied having any knowledge of the extradition request. He blamed an overworked civil service and under-resourcing in his office for any delays. Democratic left TD Pat Rabbitte took to his feet in the Dáil and announced that there was a letter in the Attorney General's office that would rock the foundations of this society. He alleged that Cardinal Daly, the head of the Catholic Church in Ireland, had written to the Attorney General. Minister Rabbitte claimed the letter pressured the AG into delaying the extradition of Smith because high-level clerics could be implicated in protecting him. Corruption allegations also politically damaged the Taoiseach himself. It had come to light that in the late 1980s, before he was Taoiseach, Mr. Reynolds had abused his position while he was Minister for Industry and Trade. In 1991, a tribunal of inquiry had been established to examine potential illegal activities in the beef processing industry. Known as the Beef Tribunal, the inquiry began to reveal evidence of systemic tax evasion, theft and fraud at Goodman International, Ireland's largest beef processor. Owned and operated by Larry Goodman, Mr. Goodman and Goodman International benefited from favourable treatment by the then Minister for Industry and Trade, Mr. Reynolds. Albert Reynolds was never charged with any offence, but the Labour Party and the public had lost confidence in him as Taoiseach. On the 16th of November 1994, the Labour Party decided to walk away from the coalition government they formed with Fianna Fáil in 1992. The following day, the 17th of November, Mr. Reynolds resigned as Taoiseach. A new three-party coalition government of the Democratic Left, Labour and Fine Gael was formed on the 15th of December 1994. It became known as the Rainbow Coalition Government. Fine Gael's John Bruton became the new Taoiseach. On the 15th of December, Mr. Bruton would appoint Nora Owens to succeed Moira Geoghegan Quinn as his new Minister for Justice. The Molloy family were now dealing with their seventh Minister for Justice since Father Niall had been killed. Ian Maher would try to get on with his life, but he never gave up the fight for justice for his uncle. The Molloy family would write to every successive Minister for Justice multiple times, appealing for Father Niall's case to be reopened. They rarely received an acknowledgement. There was no appetite from the government to reignite a controversial case that was by now receding into the past. In the 90s, fewer and fewer developments in the case occurred. On the approach to Father Niall's anniversary each year, his family would contact the media to try to revive some public interest. If they were lucky, a feature might appear in a Sunday newspaper, but by the following week, it was all forgotten again. On June 27, 1996, Veronica Gearan attended a hearing in the District Court in Naas, County Kildare. Veronica had been caught speeding, not for the first time, so she was facing the possible loss of her licence. If she lost her licence, it would seriously curtail her ability to work as a journalist. When she was given a slap on the wrist by the judge and fined £100, Veronica was elated. As she drove back towards Dublin on the Naas dual carriageway, Veronica phoned her mother to tell her the good news. Miss Bernie Gearan, in an interview with journalist Paul Williams, recalled how happy Veronica was not to have lost her licence. She was also looking forward to a Man United match on TV that evening and was reportedly in great form. Just 3 minutes after she hung up the phone with her mother, Veronica came to a stop at a set of traffic lights at Newlands Cross. A motorbike with a pillion passenger pulled up alongside her car. The man on the back of the motorbike fired 6 shots through the driver's window, then the 2 men on the motorbike sped away. Veronica would be pronounced dead at the scene. Her death shocked the nation to its core. Anyone who lived through the 90s in Ireland could tell you where they were or what they were doing when they heard Veronica Gearan had been murdered. Gardaí suspected that John Traynor, whose release from prison was secured in exchange for Father Niall's DPP file, tipped off the assassins as to Veronica's whereabouts that fateful day. In the aftermath of her death, the Criminal Assets Bureau would be established in an attempt to help combat criminal gangs by seizing all their ill-gotten gains. Veronica left behind her husband Graham and 6-year-old son Cathal. She was just 36 years old when she was murdered. On the 6th of June 1997, Ireland held another general election. Voters could choose to either re-elect the Rainbow Coalition or elect the main opposition party, Fianna Fáil, led by Bertie Ahern. Representing Dublin Central, Bertie Ahern rose to the ranks of Fianna Fáil to become their party leader in 1994. Bertie had been a loyal supporter of the now disgraced former Taoiseach Charlie Haughey. Fianna Fáil gained the most seats in the 1997 election, but not enough to form a majority government. Another coalition government consisting of Fianna Fáil and the Progressive Democrats was formed. Bertie Ahern was appointed as Taoiseach on the 27th of June 1997. The title of Minister for Justice was overhauled. Another Charlie Haughey loyalist, John O'Donoghue, was chosen as the new Minister for Justice, Equality and Law Reform. Mr. O'Donoghue would later go on to serve as the Ceann Comhairle in the Dáil in 2007. When he previously served as Minister for Arts, Sport and Tourism and then as Ceann Comhairle, Mr. O'Donoghue would claim hundreds of thousands of euros on expenses. Referred to in the media as Johnny Cash, Mr. O'Donoghue had a fondness for fine dining in Michelin-star restaurants and horse racing. He claimed expenses for limousine rentals as well as stays in luxury hotels in the UK and US. When his spending was exposed by the media in 2009, Mr. O'Donoghue would be the first Ceann Comhairle to forcefully resign. In the 12 years since Father Niall's death, the Molloys had so far seen 8 Ministers for Justice come and go. On the 8th of July 1997, Father Niall's devoted family, friends and parishioners would attend his anniversary mass in Castlecoot and say prayers by his graveside afterwards. In 1998, 5 years after the death of Teresa Flynn, Richard Flynn would remarry. He and his second wife, Anne, settled into their new married life together in Moate, a few miles from Tubber. Scant reports exist, but Richard was known to still run a modest business in the Athlone area. Also in 1998, another key witness in the case, Father James Dignan, passed away. He took with him to the grave what he knew about what really happened the night Father Niall had died. On the 11th of August 1999, Dr. Daniel O'Sullivan died of cancer at the age of 83. By the year 2000, Father Niall had been dead for 15 years. His case had slipped far from the public's consciousness. The Celtic Tiger was in full swing. Ireland's economic boom was born out of property investments and an over-reliance on the construction industry. As a result, property prices were hugely inflated. Banks and lenders providing 100% mortgages only fueled the inflation. Credit card debt, overdrafts and loans would buy many new cars and holidays. Money would be flaunted whenever the opportunity arose, whether people had it or not. Politicians and the business elite would be no exception. Fianna Fáil held power during the economic boom, so naturally they wanted to take the credit for the country's prosperity, but also to fundraise off the back of their success. One annual fundraising event would gain notoriety and a lot of negative publicity when the financial crash eventually came in 2008. Chief party fundraiser for Fianna Fáil, Des Richardson, was a friend and associate of the Taoiseach Bertie Ahern. He established what became famously known as the Fianna Fáil tent at the annual Galway races. A large marquee was erected at the racetrack for 1 week at the end of July each year, with tickets sold to raise funds for the party. Politicians and their friends flew to and from the racetrack in helicopters. Fianna Fáil members, along with their business contacts, would have what Des Richardson described as being a great party. Mr. Richardson claimed that this great party raised approximately £150,000 each year, and that there was a waiting list of over 100 people looking for cancellations. Years later, Bertie Ahern would face an Oireachtas banking inquiry looking into the reasons for the banking crisis in 2008. Former Taoiseach Ahern denied the Galway races tent was an opportunity for property developers to mingle and network with him and Fianna Fáil ministers. He told the inquiry in 2015 that there was no big deal between the connection in the Fianna Fáil tent and the construction industry. It was just a social occasion. On the 23rd of December 2001, Ian Maher, nephew of Father Niall, spokesman and campaigner for the Molloy family, would die unexpectedly at the age of 54. Ian left behind his wife Margaret and 2 sons. His brother, Bill Maher, would take over the arduous task of pursuing truth and justice for their uncle Niall. In April 2002, the Taoiseach Bertie Ahern dissolved the Dáil, and Ireland faced another general election a month later. For the first time since 1969, a sitting Irish government won re-election. Bertie Ahern was reappointed Taoiseach. Fianna Fáil gained seats in the election but did suffer one high-profile loss, the party's deputy leader, Mary O'Rourke. Mary failed to hold on to her seat in Westmeath. She was a member of the Lenihan family, the political dynasty from Athlone. Her father, Patrick Lenihan, was a TD for Longford Westmeath in the 1960s. Mary's brother was Brian Lenihan Sr. In 1987, Mary and Brian Sr. were the first brother and sister to ever serve in the same cabinet when she was Minister for Education and he was Taoiseach. Mary losing her seat was Fianna Fáil's only major upset as a result of the election. The coalition between Fianna Fáil and the Progressive Democrats would continue. Justice Frank Roe died aged 83 on the 7th of October 2003. His obituary in the Irish Times would read, "He came from a staunch Fine Gael family and his political sympathies were always well known. He was described as being strong Fine Gael this week by those who knew him, and he was active in Fine Gael politics for most of his legal career." The controversy Justice Roe caused at Richard Flynn's trial not only followed him for the rest of his days, but also well past his death. In 2012, a good friend and colleague of Frank Roe District Court Judge James O'Sullivan gave an interview to Gemma O'Doherty of the Irish Independent. Judge O'Sullivan described how he was amazed Justice Rowe chose to hear the case because he was a great friend of both the Flynns and Father Niall. He went on to say, "I was very friendly with Frank Rowe. I was amazed at him for taking the case because I always looked on him as an honourable man. I couldn't believe that he took the case or his actions throughout. He should never have said what he said to the jury. They had no choice but to follow his instructions." After Ian died, Father Niall's family pleaded with Bill not to get involved in the case. The Molloys firmly believed Ian's pursuit of truth and justice for Father Niall had led to his premature death. They didn't want to see the same thing happening to Bill. The case would lie dormant until an RTE documentary series in Irish called Scannell covered the death of Father Niall in an episode aired in 2006. This documentary would spur Bill on to reviving the case. When Ian investigated Father Niall's death, he had amassed boxes and boxes of documents. As Bill took over the campaign, he found a lot of his brother's research and files had been lost. Bill had to start over, gathering as much information on the case that he could lay his hands on. By utilising the internet, Bill managed to build up a substantial archive. The advent of YouTube created a new opportunity for Bill to get Father Niall's story out into the public consciousness. In October 2006, Bill would create a YouTube channel and begin posting compilation videos about Father Niall's case. A general election was held on the 24th of May 2007. Bertie Ahern held on to his position as Taoiseach, forming a new coalition government of Fianna Fáil, the PDs and the Green Party. Fianna Fáil Minister for Finance Brian Cowan became the new Taoiseach. The new Minister for Justice, Equality and Law Reform, Brian Lenihan Jr., was appointed on the 14th of June 2007. Minister Lenihan Jr. was the son of Brian Lenihan Sr., and also brother of the journalist Conor Lenihan, who sang Justice Frank Rowe's praises in print after Richard Flynn's trial. Brian Lenihan Jr. would become the 9th Minister for Justice to take office since Father Niall's death, but his tenure would be short-lived. Taoiseach Bertie Ahern had been coming under increasing pressure due to the findings of the Moriarty Tribunal established to look into certain payments to politicians. Evidence of corruption and tax evasion carried out by businessmen and politicians, including the former Taoiseach Charlie Haughey, was uncovered. Bertie Ahern became embroiled in the tribunal, who criticised him for signing blank cheques from the party account for then Taoiseach Haughey without even asking what they were for. The death knell for Bertie Ahern's career came when it was discovered he had received payments back in the 1990s when he was Minister for Finance. Some of the payments he received he claimed were loans. He admitted that as of 2006 he had not made any repayments of the loans or their interest. In relation to other payments he admitted receiving, Mr. Ahern stated, "What I got personally in my life, to be frank with you, is none of your business. If I got something from somebody as a present or something like that, I can use it." On the 7th of May 2008, Brian Cowan would become Taoiseach after the resignation of Bertie Ahern. He would form a coalition government with the Progressive Democrats and the Green Party. Brian Cowan was born in 1960 in County Offaly. He grew up in Clara, the son of a Fianna Fáil TD and senator. His parents ran a pub, butchers, undertakers, and his father also worked as a local auctioneer. Mr. Cowan's hometown of Clara was very proud of their native son becoming Taoiseach, and they held great hope for the future under his leadership. The new Taoiseach appointed Dermot Ahern, no relation to Bertie, as his Minister for Justice, Equality and Law Reform on the 7th of May 2008. Minister Ahern would now become the 10th Minister for Justice to hold office since Father Niall died. Mr. Cowan's tenure as Taoiseach began just weeks before the Irish banking crisis hit. He faced financial crisis after crisis, eventually culminating in him requesting a bailout from the IMF. When he left politics in 2011, the Sunday Times described Mr. Cowan's time as Taoiseach as a dismal failure, while the Irish Independent described Brian Cowan as the worst Taoiseach in the history of the state. In January 2008, Frances Cahill, daughter of the General Martin Cahill, published a book about her father. In Martin Cahill, My Father, Frances described her happy childhood and what her father meant to her. She also revealed details of Father Niall's death she alleged was contained in the DPP's file her father had stolen. She wrote, "My father recalled that the priest's head had been bashed in with a statue of a horse, information that allegedly came from the DPP's file on the case. According to my father, the evidence in the file suggests that the injuries sustained by the priest go slightly beyond banging one's head on a bedpost." In April 2008, Bill Maher would create a website called Father Niall Molloy, Unsolved Murder 1985, Family Campaign for Justice for Father Niall Molloy. Bill began to post all the material he had gathered, whereby creating a huge archive of information on the case. On a monthly basis, Bill would also update the site with any new developments or news about the case. In 2010, on the 25th anniversary of Father Niall's death, the Molloy family would also create an online petition site to gather signatures to present to the Minister for Justice in the hopes of getting the case reopened. As word of the site began to spread, the ever-increasing number of views of the site and signatures on the petition encouraged Bill to continue on the fight. The year 2010 would be the 25th anniversary of Father Niall's death. Towards the end of that summer, a journalist with the Irish Independent, Gemma O'Doherty, began an investigation into Father Niall's case. Gemma took it upon herself to try and interview as many witnesses in the case as she could find and who would agree to speak to her. On the 23rd of October 2010, Gemma's 4-page feature on Father Niall's case appeared in a weekend supplement magazine with the Irish Independent. Her main article was titled Father Molloy, The Vital New Questions. The subheading read, "Priest's distraught family call for a new investigation after reading the Irish Independent file on the 25-year mystery." Gemma's article outlined all the events of the weekend of the wedding of Maureen and Ralph. She provided a synopsis of events on the night of the murder, the trial, the inquest, and beyond. She also would highlight aspects of the case that had always concerned the Molloys. Sergeant Kevin Ford, by now retired, sat down for an interview with Gemma. He repeated his story of being the first Garda on the scene at Kilcoursey House. Sergeant Ford claimed that he had mentioned he noticed Father Niall's watch was broken and stopped at 10:40 in his original statement given in 1985. The 1985 statement Sergeant Ford gave in evidence at the trial did not mention the watch at all. The additional statement he was instructed to write for the inquest in 1986, but not asked to read, did mention he noticed the glass was broken, but there was no reference to the watch being stopped or still working. He told Gemma, "The watch was one of the first things I noticed. It was on his wrist. The face of it was broken, cracked. It was stopped at 10:40. This was included in my statement, but even to this day, it is clear in my mind, I know it from memory." Sergeant Ford recalled that as he stood in the Flynn's bedroom just after 3:30 in the morning, he thought the attack could have started 5 hours earlier, why had nobody called the guards until now? Sergeant Ford went on to state to Gemma, "To me, the watch was very crucial evidence because it suggested a lot could have happened in the house during those hours before I was called to the scene. Yet a short while later, I was instructed to hand back the watch along with some other items to Father Molloy's brother Billy, which I did. Nothing more was done about it." The retired sergeant also went on to tell Gemma that there was a significant amount of blood on the banisters. It could have suggested that the priest was first beaten downstairs and the blood came from the body being carried up the stairs or the hands of someone else. There was blood in the washhand basin as well. Both of these pieces of evidence were important, but we never learned who the blood belonged to. Gemma secured an interview with another former colleague of the late Justice Frank Rowe. This was the second of Judge Rowe's peers who felt he behaved unethically by presiding over Richard Flynn's case. Judge Buchanan, also a former president of the Circuit Court, stated that it was well known that Justice Rowe would have been acquainted with the Flynn family through horses. He also stated that it was inappropriate for Justice Rowe to have taken Richard Flynn's case and that the full facts did not come into the public domain as a result of his direction to the jury. In light of the reports that Frank Rowe knew the parties involved, Gemma stated that the Molloy family believed Justice Rowe had single-handedly corrupted the course of justice. Gemma wrote that the Molloys winning the civil case for damages against Richard Flynn had set a legal precedent. They held Richard liable for the death of Father Niall, and Richard did not dispute liability or contest the claim. Richard settled the award of over £13,000 in favour of Father Niall's sisters back in 1988. She explained that since then, the Molloys have fought a tireless campaign to get answers to the litany of striking inconsistencies surrounding their uncle's death. Gemma went on to write that one thing both they, the Molloys, and many residents of Clara have always maintained is that other people were present in Kilcoursey House the night Father Molloy died. She then asserted that the in-depth investigation undertaken by the Irish Independent uncovered new information that supported this theory. Gemma claimed to have uncovered a new witness in the case. She interviewed a businessman whose close friend was an eminent doctor that attended Maureen and Ralph's wedding. The businessman told Gemma that his doctor friend had confided in him not long after the death of Father Niall. This new witness recalled the doctor in an anguished state, admitting that he had been in Kilcoursey House the night Father Niall died. The doctor allegedly told his friend, "If I hadn't been there that night, I wouldn't be in the mess that I'm in today." According to Gemma's reporting, friends and colleagues of the anguished doctor recalled that when he returned to work after the wedding, he was not quite himself and seemed deeply troubled. He apparently died from a heart attack at a relatively young age, 7 months after Father Niall's death. For her article, Gemma also spoke with Professor Dermot Hourihan, the pathologist. Professor Hourihan compiled the pathology report that Ian Maher tried to give to the Gardaí as justification to reopen the case in 1988. The Garda commissioner at that time had stated that if new evidence came to light, he would reopen the case. When presented with the new evidence, the Gardaí advised, without providing any explanation, that reopening the case would not be possible. Professor Hourihan, who said he was puzzled by the outcome of Richard Flynn's trial, told Gemma that it was blindingly obvious that the family of Father Molloy had been deprived of justice. He agreed with Dr. Harbison as to the cause of death being due to head injuries. However, he felt that the medical evidence was very strongly suggestive that he, Father Molloy, received kicks in addition to punches with a fist. In relation to the blood in the stalk of Father Niall's kidney, he felt that was very suggestive of a severe blow to his back, probably a kick, which was probably executed while he was lying on the ground with a flexed back or in a bent position. Professor Hourihan also felt that the medical evidence was very suggestive that Father Niall had lived for hours, rather than minutes, after the injuries were first received. This, Gemma pointed out, tied in with Sergeant Ford, confirming the watch was stopped at 10:40. The evidence suggested Father Niall had been left to die for hours without any medical assistance. Again, the Molloy family wondered if Father Niall had received medical attention immediately after the assault. Could he have been saved? Gemma O'Doherty's 4-page feature on Father Niall's death reinvigorated serious interest in the case, interest that was proving difficult for the government to ignore. Labour TD Pat Rabbitte and Fine Gael's Justice spokesman Alan Shatter both called for a full re-examination of the case. The Minister for Justice, Dermot Ahern, during questions, would tell the deputies that it was a matter entirely for the Gardaí, effectively passing the buck. Pat Rabbitte disagreed, stating that the Minister for Justice had the power to instigate a commission of investigation if he wished. Labour's Pat Rabbitte and Fine Gael's Alan Shatter both promised that if their parties came to power in the next election, they would establish a commission of investigation into the case. On the 22nd of November 2010, Gemma O'Doherty published another article in the Irish Independent. Gemma confirmed that details from the investigation undertaken by the Irish Independent had been given to Gardaí. Those details included names of individuals who Gemma claimed held information about Father Niall's final hours. She spoke with Bill Maher about what the Molloy family hoped would come about due to the renewed public interest in the case. Bill explained that the Garda Commissioner, Faulkner Murphy, was nearing retirement. The Molloy family wrote to the Garda Commissioner asking that he officially reopen the case before he retires. Bill would tell Gemma, "Niall was a wonderful, gentle human being who never hurt another soul. Our family will never give up fighting to find out the full facts surrounding his horrendous killing. In light of all the new evidence, we urge the Gardaí to act now and reopen the case immediately." Gemma would go on to report that the Garda Commissioner, Faulkner Murphy, confirmed he had appointed the head of the Garda Cold Case Unit, Detective Superintendent Christy Mangan, to re-examine Father Niall's case. She also wrote that a number of individuals who had information about Father Niall's death told her they were keen to hand it over to Gardaí and hoped to hear from the Gardaí soon. In fact, according to Gemma's article, the Cold Case Unit had already interviewed 2 individuals who had come forward with new evidence. Bill Maher was entitled under the Freedom of Information Act to request all records on Father Niall's case from government departments or certain public bodies. He would request access to view the inquest file being held by the coroner of County Offaly, Mr. Brian Mahon. Both Bill and the Irish Independent newspaper would write to the coroner requesting sight of his file. Mr. Mahon was the deputy coroner at the time of Father Niall's inquest back in 1986. Because the coroner had taken ill the night before, Mr. Mahon presided over the inquest. In January 1991, Mr. Mahon reported a burglary and arson attack at his office over the preceding Christmas holidays. The coroner's office was ransacked and the burglars started a fire. After the break-in, Mr. Mahon stated that the fire had destroyed a number of papers, but luckily Father Niall's file had survived the fire. When he received requests from Bill and the Irish Independent to see the file, Mr. Mahon had to admit that he was unable to meet this request, as Father Niall's file had in fact been destroyed in the fire back in 1990. Mr. Mahon told the Irish Independent that the state pathologist's office, where Dr. Harbison had worked, was also unable to locate their file on Father Niall. In early December 2010, Mr. Mahon confirmed that he had requested a copy of his inquest report from Tullamore Court House on behalf of the Molloy family. When Mr. Mahon obtained the copy of his report, Bill travelled from Dublin to Tullamore to review it in Mr. Mahon's office. The coroner would not allow Bill to view any of the photographic material contained in the file as he deemed it too sensitive. Bill contacted the Court Service of Ireland and the Department of Justice, both of whom confirmed that the contents of an inquest report can be made available to any Irish citizen. By the time the Irish Independent reported on the story in mid-December 2010, the coroner had agreed he would show Bill the photographs the following week. This would be only one example of difficulties Bill encountered while trying to get documentation relating to the case. As well as being destroyed in a fire, he would be told files and evidence were lost when offices or Garda stations moved premises. Other evidence had been destroyed while stored in basements that had got flooded. The Garda cold case review into Father Niall's death would be undertaken by the newly formed Serious Crime Review Team, or the SCRT. The SCRT was headed up by Detective Superintendent Christy Mangan. In a two-part documentary by Sharon Lawless called The Killing of Father Niall Molloy, which aired on RTE in September 2021, Detective Superintendent Mangan explained that the SCRT began the review by looking for all the original exhibits in the case. He said that, normally when conducting a review of a case, you would go back to the original stations where the exhibits should have been housed. A number of Garda stations were searched in order to try and discover where these exhibits lay, but we were unable to locate them. The SCRT then proceeded to invite witnesses to make formal statements on a voluntary basis. Irish law cannot compel someone to speak to the Gardaí unless they wish to do so. Detective Superintendent Mangan explained, "It's very hard to get people to tell you what they know because they have been instructed clearly by their legal advisors, and quite rightly so, as to not incriminate themselves." On the 17th of November 2010, the SCRT interviewed Gemma O'Doherty and took a formal statement from her. She began by explaining that in August 2010, she received a phone call from a person she was not willing to name, but that their call had led to her looking into Father Niall's case. Gemma confirmed that as a result, she spoke to a number of individuals. The first person she mentioned was the businessman she wrote about in her article, the one who was a close friend of an eminent doctor. The doctor died in February 1986, but not before he had confided in the businessman about events in Kilcoursey House that were causing him some anguish. The businessman told Gemma that he would be prepared to speak to the Gardaí, but in January 2011, when he was contacted by the SCRT, apparently he declined to be interviewed. Gemma also outlined the discussions she had with retired Sergeant Kevin Ford and Professor Dermot Hurahan, which she had detailed in her 4-page feature. Another witness Gemma tried to approach was an employee of the Flynns at Kilcoursey House back in 1985. The employee had originally told the Gardaí that he had encountered Teresa Flynn in the house twice on the evening Father Niall died. Gemma wanted to ask the employee about meeting Teresa Flynn that evening, as Teresa had claimed to be still visiting with the Goodbodies. The employee had refused to speak to Gemma, so she suggested to the Gardaí that they should re-interview him as part of their review. In total, Gemma would suggest that the Gardaí interview or re-interview 35 separate individuals. The list included the young girl who saw Father Niall on his horse and trap on the Sunday evening he was killed. She would also recommend that all of the younger members of the Flynn family who were in Kilcoursey House that night be interviewed. Of the 35 names Gemma provided to the SCRT, 17 of them agreed to make formal statements. 5 of them had already given statements back in 1985, so they would provide additional statements. 12 of them had never spoken to the Gardaí before now. The SCRT also compiled their own list of witnesses they wished to speak to. As well as the 35 names Gemma had given them, they would also interview a further 24 individuals. The Gardaí from the SCRT contacted Bill Maher and offered him an opportunity to make a statement. Bill remembered that on Monday, the 8th of July 1985, he got a phone call from his brother Ian, telling him Father Niall had been in an accident involving a shotgun. Bill's sister then phoned Kilcoursey House twice that morning, trying to find out what had happened. She couldn't find out what was going on. Bill explained that his Uncle William went to Kilcoursey House that day, where Richard Flynn told him an argument had erupted over politics. Bill recalled being told that Richard admitted to William he had struck Father Niall. Before his funeral, when Bill saw his uncle's body laid out, he remembered seeing a significant injury to Father Niall's lower left jaw. Bill thought the wound looked like it had been caused by a sharp object. Bill then went on to recount how a year before his death, Father Niall had popped in to say hello when up in Dublin visiting his solicitor, Liam Lycett. Bill explained the difficulties in trying to get any information from Mr. Lycett after Father Niall died. Mr. Lycett had denied ever representing Father Niall or his partnership with Teresa. Bill pointed out that his family ended up making a complaint against Mr. Lycett before the Law Society. Despite being censured, Mr. Lycett to that day would not hand over any documentation relating to Father Niall or the business. Bill told the Gardaí that he had been made aware by Mr. Egan in Fear and Murtha Solicitors in Athlone that Father Niall had been in his office on the Friday before he died. His aunt and cousin then attended an appointment with Mr. Egan the following week. Bill claimed that Father Niall's thoroughbred showjumper Step-Aside had been sold on behalf of Teresa Flynn at the Dublin Horse Show within a month of his uncle's death. He also brought up the break-in at Father Niall's home sometime before he died. Bill would mention that some of Father Niall's private papers had been stolen. A small amount of cash had been stolen too, but was later found by a neighbour, while a more substantial amount of money had been left untouched. Bill repeated the rumour he had been told by his Uncle William that the DPP was godfather to one of the Flynn children. Bill told the Gardaí that a nun in England had given William this piece of information. He would also tell the Gardaí about an offer that had been made to William by a nun from the Poor Clare Order. He said that she offered to pay the legal fees for the Molloys if they would let the poor man rest in peace, referring to Father Niall. Bill imparted further details about Veronica Gearan getting sight of Father Niall's stolen file before she was killed. He said that Veronica claimed to have visited a solicitor's office in Parliament Street in Dublin, where she was shown the file. Veronica told Bill that a member of the Gardaí she was friendly with warned her not to write about Father Niall's stolen file. Bill did not believe the testimony the 3 Gardaí from the Technical Bureau gave about the watch at Father Niall's inquest. He pointed out that the findings of Professor Hourihan's report also suggested that his uncle had been left to die for hours. He reiterated that Professor Hourihan had found evidence suggestive of Father Niall being kicked as well as punched. Before concluding the interview, Bill told the Gardaí about a conversation he had had with the coroner for County Offaly, Brian Mahon. Bill had visited Mr. Mahon's office in Tullamore to see a copy of Father Niall's inquest file. Father Niall had an abrasion near his groin, which Dr. Harbison did not attach any importance to. During the inquest, Mr. Mahon stated that he could not understand how Father Niall sustained this particular injury. Bill told the Gardaí that he had asked Mr. Mahon if anything untoward had happened to his uncle's body. He claimed that in front of a witness, Mr. Mahon replied that it had emerged at the inquest that Father Niall had been kicked in the balls. The SCRT would interview and re-interview dozens of witnesses in the case. The witness statements taken by the SCRT would not be made public. Instead, the statements would be summarized, and the names of any living witnesses were redacted when they were eventually published in a report. As an identifier, each of the redacted witnesses was assigned either an initial or double initials. On the 20th of January 2011, the Gardaí of the SCRT would travel to Clara to interview some of the locals. Having lived in Kilcoursey since 1969, Witness X had gotten to know the Flynns well after they moved into Kilcoursey House in 1981. This witness had not been approached to make a statement back in 1985. He explained that he was often hired to do odd jobs around Kilcoursey House and on its surrounding land. He stated that he also got to know Father Niall well because Father Niall had an apartment in Kilcoursey House and would visit every second day. Father Niall paid him for the work he did. As a result, he was of the opinion that Father Niall was the paymaster. X told the Gardaí that he witnessed Father Niall being involved in making decisions in the business, even down to what colour to paint a gate. Father Niall had previously told Witness X that he had always settled the business accounts in August, around the time of the Dublin Horse Show and again at Christmas. He would tell the Gardaí that he was surprised that Father Niall didn't officiate Maureen and Ralph's wedding mass. He noticed that Father Niall arrived at the reception later that evening at around 7:30 p.m. X and his wife left the wedding at approximately 1 a.m. He recalled Father Niall walk with them to their car as they were leaving. Father Niall told the witness that he had to say 2 masses the following morning in Castlecoot. When Witness X got word on Monday the 8th of July that Father Niall was dead, he decided to go over to Kilcoursey House to sympathise with the Flynns. He recalled going into Kilcoursey House and saw there were Gardaí stationed at the foot of the stairs. The Gardaí were not allowing anyone upstairs, but they did allow X to go down the hall to the kitchen. When he entered the kitchen, he found Richard Flynn was there. X then stated that Richard told him it was a sorry old business. I did it. He also recalled Richard making remarks about having fierce strength while clenching his fist in front of him. Witness X confirmed to the Gardaí that the Kilcoursey groomsman, referred to as Witness C, had stayed in his home after Father Niall was killed. X felt that this was because Witness C was afraid to stay in Kilcoursey House but didn't elaborate as to why. While interviewing Witness X, the Gardaí of the SCRT would also speak to his daughter, referred to as Witness D. She was the 15-year-old girl who last saw Father Niall on his horse and trap the evening he was killed. This would be the first time she was approached and asked to give a statement to the Gardaí. She remembered seeing Father Niall on Sunday, the 7th of July, between 7:30 p.m. and 8:30 p.m. Father Niall was driving the horse and trap, heading away from Clara towards Kilbeggan. After she saw him, he turned around and started travelling back towards Kilcoursey House. The Gardaí also asked her about any conversations she may have had with Witness C when he stayed as a guest in her home. She told the Gardaí she couldn't remember the specifics well enough to make a statement about the discussions with Witness C at that time. The SCRT would re-interview Witness D in August 2012. In her second interview, she told the Gardaí that she did remember a conversation she had with Witness C after he came to stay in their home. Although she could not remember the specifics of the conversation, she recalled he had insinuated certain things about the goings-on in Kilcoursey House. She described getting a gut feeling about there being more people in the house when Father Niall was killed than was being admitted to. She explained that she was only 15 at the time, so she would not have understood the significance of what Witness C had told her. By the time the SCRT was established, Teresa Flynn, Aunt May, Father Dignan and Dr. O'Sullivan had all died. Detective Superintendent Mangan made a request to meet and speak with Richard Flynn, who was by now 83 years of age. On the 8th of February 2011, Richard's doctor sent a letter to the SCRT certifying Richard as being physically and mentally incapable of undergoing questioning by the Gardaí. The SCRT tracked down and interviewed a small number of guests who had attended Maureen and Ralph's wedding back in 1985. The guests, mainly because of a mutual interest in horses, knew both the Flynns and Father Niall. Anne Lenihan, the widow of Brian Lenihan Sr., stated that she and Teresa Flynn were friends since university and had remained friends for years after. According to Anne, she and her husband attended the wedding and left at around 7 p.m, just after the speeches. None of the guests interviewed noticed any friction or tension between Father Niall and the Flynns on the day of the wedding. Witness O would be referred to in her summarized statement as having written a book in 2007 about her father. In February 2011, she met voluntarily with the Gardaí of the SCRT. Her name had been suggested to the SCRT by journalist Gemma O'Doherty as someone who may have warranted being interviewed. The statement Witness O gave related to the part in her book where she described finding her father studying Father Niall's file after it had been stolen from the DPP's office. She explained that one day at home she found her father surrounded by boxes of paperwork. He was reading a file while also taking notes on an A4 sheet of paper. He would not show the file to his daughter, but he did tell her what it related to. He told her that the file was about a priest called Father Niall Molloy who was killed in a house owned by a family called Flynn from Clara. She remembered being told that the priest had been beaten with a statue of a horse. Witness O would also state that her father had spoken with Veronica Gearan about the case and gave the impression that there had been a cover-up. She explained that she understood that her father and Veronica had also come to an agreement. If her father showed Veronica Father Niall's file, she in turn would write about the church, corrupt politicians and corrupt Gardaí. Undisclosed to the public, back in 1988, 3 years after Father Niall's death, the Gardaí had investigated certain aspects of the case. They would interview a number of members of staff from the Bridge House Hotel in Tullamore who had catered Maureen and Ralph's wedding and also Sunday lunch the day after. In 2011, the Gardaí of the SCRT would re-interview these witnesses. The catering manager, referred to as Witness I, had not been approached to make a statement back in 1985. When approached by the SCRT, she repeated the same statement she had given in 1988. The manager had been tasked with organising the catering on the weekend of the wedding. She told Gardaí that she had been instructed by Teresa Flynn to keep a seat at the top table for Father Niall. She recalled that Father Niall arrived at the marquee on the grounds of Kilcoursey House at approximately 6:45 p.m. Once the food was served and the tables were cleared, she left Kilcoursey House at approximately 9 p.m. that night. She told Gardaí she did not recall anything unusual happening the evening of the wedding. The following day, she remembered being contacted by Teresa Flynn, asking if she could organise the catering for lunch in the marquee that afternoon. The manager made the necessary arrangements, but instead of going to Kilcoursey House, she sent 2 members of staff with the food. The manager told Gardaí that she expected the staff to drop off the food and return to the Bridge House Hotel. However, the Flynns had asked them to stay to serve the food. She stated that the staff remained at Kilcoursey House until approximately 6 p.m. that evening. Later, that same Sunday night, after she had finished work, the manager went out socialising with her parents. She told Gardaí that at approximately 1:45 a.m., while she and her parents were driving past Dr. O'Sullivan's house in Kilbeggan, they noticed that Dr. O'Sullivan was getting into his car. A waiter, referred to as Witness F, worked part-time in the Bridge House Hotel. He had also spoken to the Gardaí in 1988. In February 2011, he confirmed to the Gardaí of the SCRT that he was working at the Flynn wedding on this Saturday and was one of the 2 members of staff who provided the catering for the lunch on the Sunday. He had been working part-time at weekends as he was also attending college in Limerick at the time. He told Gardaí that his manager asked him and a colleague to deliver the catering for Sunday lunch to Kilcoursey House. He delivered the food at around 11 a.m. and had left Kilcoursey House by 1:30 p.m. He didn't notice anything unusual either on the day of the wedding or during the few hours he was at Kilcoursey House on the Sunday. A few days after the wedding, he was asked to go back to Kilcoursey House to collect delf and catering items belonging to the Bridge House Hotel. When he arrived, there was a Garda posted at the entrance gate to Kilcoursey House who granted him access. He told Gardaí that he spoke with Teresa Flynn, who thanked him for how well the wedding went. He remembered she was very grateful and gave him a tip of £20. Father Niall's death was the talk of the area, and he stated that he had heard Teresa Flynn had received facial injuries. He recalled being surprised when he spoke to Teresa because he didn't see any visible marks on her face. It is unlikely the waiter spoke to Teresa days after the wedding. When discharged, she went to stay in Tupper House with David and Anne. At no time was Teresa in Kilcoursey House while the Gardaí were still there. Back in 1988, the waiter was approached by Gardaí trying to ascertain if he had written the anonymous letter sent to William Molloy. The letter was apparently written by a waiter who was also a student in Limerick at the time. The waiter denied being the author of the letter. At the time, he provided a sample of his handwriting to the Gardaí. The Gardaí did not conduct any formal handwriting analysis. The Gardaí of the SCRT also spoke to the waitress, witness J, who was asked to deliver the catering for the Sunday lunch to Kilcoursey House. Her statement corroborated the waiters in that they arrived at Kilcoursey House at around 11 a.m. and were back at the Bridge House Hotel by 2 p.m. In January 2011, the Green Party walked away from the coalition government formed with Fianna Fáil and the Progressive Democrats. The Dáil was dissolved and a general election was held on the 25th of February 2011. The financial crisis had irreparably damaged Fianna Fáil and Taoiseach Brian Cowan in the opinion polls. Fianna Fáil suffered their worst election defeat since the founding of the state. Fine Gael and the Labour Party made the most gains, which led to them establishing a coalition government. The leader of Fine Gael, Enda Kenny, would become the new Taoiseach. He would appoint South Dublin TD Alan Shatter as his Minister for Justice and Reform. Minister Shatter had previously declared in the Dáil that should Fine Gael come to power, they would carry out a full review of Father Niall's case. He would now inherit the SCRT review. Minister Alan Shatter would be the 11th Minister for Justice appointed since Father Niall's death. Ralph's best man and groomsman had not been asked to provide statements back in 1985. The best man would eventually be tracked down by Gardaí to Egypt, and he gave them a statement over the phone in 2011. He had grown up with Ralph in Limerick, and through Ralph he had gotten to know David Flynn very well. He recalled going to the pub with the younger group of guests that Sunday evening and then returning to Tupper House afterwards as he was a guest of David and Anne's. The best man remembered Ralph and Maureen and the remainder of the group leaving to go back to Kilcoursey House, but he didn't know at what time. After they left, he went to bed. The best man remembered he had been made aware the next morning that something serious had happened. He didn't realise someone had died in Kilcoursey House the night before, but he subsequently read about it in a newspaper. At the time, he was living and working in London. He left Tupper House that Monday morning and got a lift with Ralph's groomsman to Dublin Airport for his flight back to the UK. Ralph's groomsman also provided a statement when contacted by the Gardaí in 2011. He had attended college with Ralph and his best man. He remembered seeing Father Niall at the wedding, but did not recall seeing Father Niall on Sunday. The same story of when Richard, Teresa and Father Niall had gone to the Good Bodies, the younger guests deciding to go to the pub and then on to Tupper House, would be recalled. The groomsman was also staying in Tubber House as a guest of David and Anne's, but he couldn't remember what time he went to bed. The next morning, Anne told him to help himself to breakfast and to let himself out. He was made aware that there had been a situation in Kilcoursey House, but he didn't know the details or that someone had died. He then gave the best man a lift to Dublin Airport. He claimed that it was only when he and the best man arrived at the airport that Monday morning they both discovered Father Niall had died. On the 15th of March 2011, the Gardaí of the SCRT interviewed the former DPP, Mr. Eamon Barnes. Mr. Barnes confirmed that when the Gardaí submitted their file to him on the 31st of July 1985, he issued the direction on the 20th of August to charge and prosecute Richard Flynn for manslaughter and assault. He emphatically denied receiving any letters from Justice Frank Rowe. He stated that no one had contacted or corresponded with his office trying to sway his decision to prosecute Richard Flynn. The Gardaí of the SCRT conducted a review of all the documents they could find that were held in the DPP's office. No letters from Justice Rowe were found. The Gardaí from the SCRT also asked Mr. Barnes about a rumour going around that he had known the Flynn family. The rumour alleged that Mr. Barnes was a godfather to one of the Flynn children and had possibly been a guest at Maureen and Ralph's wedding. Mr. Barnes told Gardaí he became aware of this rumour around the time of Richard Flynn's trial, but that it was completely false. As far as he knew, he never met any members of the Flynn family. Gardaí from the SCRT followed up on the allegations made in the rumour by checking the baptismal records for Maureen, David, Zandra and Anita. None of the 4 baptism certificates list Eamon Barnes as godfather. On the 25th of April 2011, David Flynn agreed to speak with the SCRT on a voluntary basis. For the first time in 26 years, a member of the Flynn family was willing to answer questions put to them by the Gardaí instead of relying on a prepared statement. Detective Garda Pat Flood and Detective Superintendent Christy Mangan began by asking David about Teresa and Father Niall's business dealings. David would explain that his mother and Father Niall conducted their business completely independently. They did not involve any of the other members of the Flynn family in their dealings and that he didn't even know what their business entailed. He admitted that from 1985 onwards, his relationship with Teresa had changed from one of mother-son to more of a purely business arrangement. While he acknowledged this change in the relationship, he claimed there was no animosity between them. He strenuously denied his mother had stopped speaking to him. David told the Gardaí that after Father Niall died, Teresa did not want to live in Kilcoursey House anymore, so she had asked him to sell it. The Gardaí specifically asked David about the Jack B. Yeats paintings, known to have belonged to Father Niall and at one time hung in his rooms in Kilcoursey House. David described some items he and his wife Anne were left by Teresa when she died, but he denied knowing anything about valuable paintings. He was then asked what his father's financial situation was like back in 1985. David stated that as of July 1985, Richard's business situation was that he was asset-rich but cash-poor. He explained that even though times were tough, Richard had managed to hold on to the chain of shops without having to make any staff redundant. David remembered that at the time of Maureen's wedding, his parents' relationship with Father Niall was as good as it had always been. When asked, he did not know why Father Niall had not celebrated his sister's wedding mass, nor was he aware of any business discussions that took place on the day of the wedding. The Gardaí asked David what he knew about a number of specific aspects of the case. What did he know about Father Niall's watch? He would deny knowing anything about it. What about a broken glass coffee table? He denied knowing anything about that too. David clarified there was no safe in Kilcoursey House. He denied knowing about any insurance policy on Father Niall's life. He also knew nothing about the break-in at Father Niall's house. He would, however, admit to having some understanding of the deal between his parents and Father Niall to buy land at Kilcoursey House. He stated that it had been agreed Father Niall and Teresa would buy 20 acres of land at Kilcoursey, but the Land Commission refused the plans and would not allow the sale to go ahead. He did not mention having any knowledge of monies paid or owed as a result of the deal falling through. David then went on to describe the events of the night Father Niall died. He recalled being awoken by the phone in the early hours of Monday, the 8th of July, 1985. He remembered his new brother-in-law, Ralph Parks, was on the phone and asked him to come to Kilcoursey House, but did not explain what was wrong. David stated that he couldn't remember the drive from his home to Kilcoursey House, nor could he remember arriving. He did recall being shocked at what had happened. He noticed his father appeared to be very calm, but he said he put this down to shock. David claimed that he and Richard did not discuss what had happened. Instead, he said he called the family solicitor, Liam Lycett, the following day. After driving the 2-hour journey from Dublin, Mr. Lycett arrived at Kilcoursey House at 7:30 a.m. that same morning. Later that day, David recalled Richard had asked him to take a look at some injuries he sustained in the row the night before. David described seeing black and blue bruises on his father's upper arms and hands. He said that Liam Lycett suggested they take photos of the injuries, but these photos never came to light. David was asked about the delay in calling the authorities that night. He said he could not explain why it took so long to contact the Gardaí, but he kept insisting that there had been no family discussion to follow any particular plan of action. He repeated this more than once. He insisted that it was Richard who had contacted Dr. O'Sullivan that night. This part of David's statement completely contradicts the original statements made by the rest of his family, the parish priest who summoned the doctor, and Dr. O'Sullivan himself. The Gardaí confronted David with the statement he had made on camera to RTE just after the inquest in Tullamore in 1986. David had told RTE correspondent Tom McCaughrean that it's very difficult when one knows certain answers and isn't in a position to comment. It makes it very difficult to live with. The Gardaí now wanted to know what David meant by that. David explained that back then there were rumours and speculation that he knew were untrue. He claimed he could have shown the rumours and speculation to be untrue, but at the time he felt he couldn't say anything specifically. David did not elaborate as to what the rumours and speculation he knew to be untrue were. He did not offer the Gardaí any basis as to how he would refute them, nor did he give any explanation as to why he felt at the time he couldn't refute them. The SCRT did not seem to press him on any of these points. In 1994, Veronica Gearan had published an article in the Sunday Independent. In the article, she claimed to have seen letters from Justice Rowe to the DPP in the stolen file on Father Niall. The Gardaí from the SCRT had written to the solicitors who acted for the independent newspaper group. They wanted to know if any letters or documents Veronica had used to conduct research for her article still existed. On the 12th of May 2011, the solicitors for the independent newspapers replied that no letters or documents that had related to Veronica's article could be found. The SCRT also interviewed an ex-employee of the Department of Justice who worked as an usher to Justice Frank Rowe from 1973 till the judge's retirement in 1990. The usher knew Justice Rowe had a passion for horses, even owning some racehorses. He never knew the judge to take time off when courts were sitting to follow his interest in horse racing. He was also aware the judge had previously owned and ridden his own horse to victory in the Ulster Grand National. The usher told the Gardaí that the judge never discussed the Flynn case or any other case with him. Justice Rowe never mentioned either the Flynn or Molloy families to him, nor did he ever drive the judge to meet any members of these families. The usher gave the SCRT an example of Justice Rowe once refusing to hear a case when he discovered he knew one of the parties involved. He could not say if Justice Rowe wrote to the DPP, as correspondence of this nature would have been private. To the best of his knowledge, Justice Rowe knew none of the parties involved in the Flynn case. The Gardaí began their review of Father Niall's case in November 2010. Once the announcement was made to review the case, the Molloy family decided to obtain another expert medical opinion on Father Niall's brain injuries. They would then pass the report on to the Gardaí for them to take into consideration as part of their review. With the assistance of Professor Dermot Hourihan, they commissioned Dr. Francesca Brett to review the slides of Father Niall's brain and provide a report of her findings. Dr. Brett, a consultant neuropathologist in Beaumont Hospital, is an eminent Irish expert on brain injuries. Dated the 24th of May 2011, Dr. Brett's report outlined how she examined the red dead neurons in slides from different areas of Father Niall's brain. Red neurons are found in brain cells. As a result of the head trauma he sustained, Father Niall's brain cells were severed from their neuron circuitry system. Cells that are severed from the system undergo a change in appearance. They begin to turn a darker color as they die. The severity of the dark cell changes can be used to determine approximately how long the survival interval was between receiving the injuries and eventual death. Dr. Brett found evidence to suggest that after he was beaten, Father Niall could have survived for a period of between 6 to 12 hours. In June 2011, the Molloy family, through their solicitor, submitted Dr. Brett's report to the SCRT to help with the review of the case. The Gardaí asked the Molloys if they would return Father Niall's pathology slides. Because the Gardaí had already misplaced most of the physical evidence from the case, the Molloy family would refuse the Gardaí's request to hand over the slides. Witness Q was a native of Clara. He grew up with Witness C, who had worked for the Flynns for 10 years. He also went to national school with David Flynn. On the 9th of August 2012, Q volunteered a statement to Detective Superintendent Christy Mangan of the SCRT. Witness Q would describe his friendship with Witness C as them being very close friends. He explained that they did nearly everything together while they were growing up. Q explained that Witness C used to arrange for him to do casual work for the Flynns. As a result, he told Detective Superintendent Mangan that he also knew Richard, Teresa, and Father Niall very well. He understood Teresa and Father Niall were in business together as they made joint decisions about any work he undertook, stating that they both had equal authority when it came to work in the stables. Q further explained that when he got married in June 1985, he and Witness C didn't see as much of each other. However, they still met regularly at GAA matches as they were teammates. About 2 weeks after Father Niall was killed, Q alleged that Witness C told him certain things about what had happened in Kilcoursey House. He would claim that Witness C had told him that a dispute arose between Father Niall and the Flynns. Father Niall had bought 60 acres of land around Kilcoursey House for £40,000. He understood the dispute came about because planning was denied and Father Niall was trying to get his money back. Witness Q went on to tell Detective Superintendent Mangan that Witness C had described an incident involving Father Niall that had happened a few days before he was killed. He recalled being told that a row had broken out in Kilcoursey House on the Thursday before the wedding. During this row, a glass coffee table in the TV room had been broken. Q was led to believe that the row that broke out on the Sunday night when Father Niall was killed was a continuation of the row that began the Thursday before. Q would reveal the version of events as he understood them. On the evening of Sunday, the 7th of July 1985, there was a considerable number of people in Kilcoursey House. Father Niall was the victim of a violent assault downstairs that evening. The people in the house took legal advice by telephone. It was decided that the considerable number of people who were present should leave immediately. Father Niall was then carried upstairs to Richard and Teresa's bedroom, where he was left for hours before anyone called the Gardaí. Solicitors for the Molloys submitted the medical report from Dr. Brett to the SCRT in June 2011. The Gardaí of the SCRT in turn commissioned their own medical report. Dr. Michael Farrell was a consultant neuropathologist in Beaumont Hospital and had worked in the Richmond Hospital in the 1980s. Dr. Harbison had examined Father Niall's brain in the presence of Dr. Farrell in 1985. He also consulted with Dr. Farrell again in 1989 when asked for comments on Dr. Dinn and Professor Hurahan's findings about the time of Father Niall's death. In his report, dated the 16th of August 2012, Dr. Farrell explained that he had examined the photographs of Father Niall's skull. He described that even though the skull appeared to be intact, he found evidence of bleeding in several different areas. On examining representative brain slides, Dr. Farrell also found the red neurons in the cells had undergone dark cell changes. As a result, Dr. Farrell was of the opinion that Father Niall, after being beaten, had been alive for a number of hours before he died. Dr. Farrell's report, commissioned by the SCRT, concurred with his fellow colleagues in that Father Niall could have been left to die for up to 6 hours. On the 19th of September 2012, retired Sergeant Ford gave a further statement to the Gardaí of the SCRT. He had served as sergeant in Clara Station for 17 years, and during that time, no members of the Flynn family had ever come to the attention of the Gardaí. Sergeant Ford confirmed that when he arrived at Kilcoursey House in July 1985, he did not post Gardaí outside the bedroom door to secure the scene. Instead, he posted them at the foot of the stairs. In this, his most recent statement, Sergeant Ford did not address any of the issues he raised in Gemma O'Doherty's article. He did not mention Father Niall's watch, nor did he allude to any of the unidentified bloodstains that had concerned him. On the 24th of September 2012, the witness, referred to as Q, met with the SCRT again. He had met witness C again since he last spoke to the SCRT a month before. Q told the Gardaí that C had confided in him that when he made his statement back in 1985, the Gardaí had, quote, put words in my mouth, end quote. Witness C had explained that he was really scared at having to go to the Garda station to give his statement. He had never had any dealings with the Gardaí before Father Niall's death. Witness C told him that he found that when he was brought into the interview room, the Gardaí seemed more nervous than he was. He claimed the investigating Gardaí suggested a version of events, and Witness C agreed to go along with that version. By early October 2012, the SCRT would interview Dr. Dan O'Sullivan's son twice. Referred to as Witness H, he would confirm his parents were very close friends of Richard and Teresa Flynn. He recalled that back in the 1960s, his father and Richard Flynn had considered going into the hotel business together. He also described how close Father Niall and the Flynns were. Witness H then explained that he did not attend Maureen and Ralph's wedding, but that his parents had been guests. He could not confirm what time his parents left the wedding to go home at. He did confirm that his father had attended Kilcoursey House in the early hours of Monday, the 8th of July, 1985. He would tell the Gardaí that his father very rarely talked about what had happened that night, but wanted to make clear that Dr. O'Sullivan did not know what had gone on before he arrived in Kilcoursey House. Witness H would tell the Gardaí of the SCRT that he had previously met with Gemma O'Doherty and discussed Father Niall's case for approximately 30 minutes. He insisted that he never told Gemma that his mother died from the stress of what had happened. He clarified to the Gardaí that his mother had died from an undiagnosed heart condition a month after Father Niall's death. He remembered none of the Flynns attended her funeral. On the 10th of October 2012, witness Q sat down with the Gardaí of the SCRT for a third time. He would repeat the details of the previous conversations he had had with witness C. The Gardaí asked Q why didn't he come forward back in 1985 with the stories he had been told. Q said he had told his wife and some friends what C had told him at that time. He didn't feel the need to speak to the Gardaí as he figured they would uncover the true story in the course of their own investigation. Since his last interview with the SCRT, witness Q had again confronted witness C over the story he was told back in 1985. Witness C denied knowing anything about what had happened, as well as denying he told Q anything of the sort. Q persisted and put it to him that back in 1985, witness C had told him the whole story. According to witness Q, C then replied, "Well, if I did, I shouldn't have." Q would tell the SCRT that he had recorded this conversation with witness C. He had since deleted the recording, but not before he gave Gemma O'Doherty a copy. Gemma did not mention in her statement that she was in possession of a recording of the conversation between witness Q and witness C. It is unknown if the SCRT requested or obtained a copy either. On the 6th of November 2012, a man who had previously been employed as a mortuary assistant in Tullamore Hospital gave a statement to the SCRT. The assistant explained that his job included preparing the bodies for post-mortem. He was working the day Father Niall's body arrived at the morgue in Tullamore Hospital. He recalled opening one of the fridges where the bodies were stored. When he unwrapped the plastic, he saw the body of a man who had dried blood on his face. The assistant also recalled seeing a wound on the lower left side of the man's face. He described the wound as being shaped like an anchor or a horseshoe. He began to wash the dead man's face when Dr. Harbison arrived. He was dismissed as Dr. Harbison enlisted the help of another mortuary assistant for the post-mortem. The assistant told the Gardaí that he didn't realise until later that day that it had been Father Niall's body he saw in the morgue. Gossip was flying around among the hospital staff at this stage. He had heard Teresa Flynn was in intensive care and confessed to sneaking in to have a look. He remembered seeing her face was badly bruised and she had a black eye. The mortuary assistant told the SCRT that he had been contacted by Gemma O'Doherty and as a result he had signed the online petition created by the Molloy family. On the 15th of November 2012, witness C volunteered to give a statement to the SCRT as he wanted to clear up a few things that people have said I know about. He would begin by confirming to the Gardaí that the statement he gave back in July 1985 was true and accurate. He gave the Gardaí a bit of background on his working history with the Flynns. By 1985, witness C had worked for the Flynns for 10 years, from when he was 16 years old. He explained that due to Richard's ill health, cattle were phased out and he became more involved with the horses. C was aware that Father Niall and Teresa were in business together. He remembered that Father Niall used to travel to Kilcoursey House 2 or 3 times a week to check on the horses. However, he recalled that it was always Richard or Teresa who paid his wages, never Father Niall. C described Father Niall's friendship with both himself and the Flynns as them all enjoying a normal relationship. He never saw any rows or disputes between Father Niall and either Richard or David Flynn, but added that sometimes Richard didn't agree with the prices they were spending on the horses. C would recall helping out around the grounds of Kilcoursey House in preparation for the wedding. He described the general mood leading up to the wedding as being jolly. He and his mother had been invited as guests at the wedding. He told the SCRT the only famous person he remembered seeing at the wedding was Brian Lenihan Sr. C then recounted the events of Sunday, the 7th of July, 1985. He repeated the details of his original statement about being at a match in Tullamore that day. He returned to Kilcoursey House that evening, but by now he couldn't remember at what time. Witness C confirmed he met Teresa Flynn in Kilcoursey House before he went out for the night, but did not provide a time for the encounter either. C did remember returning to Kilcoursey House at 3 a.m. and being told that Father Niall was dead. He insisted that no one from the Flynn family ever discussed that night's events with him, then or since. He stated he was only ever told it was a terrible accident. When asked about his stay with the neighbours next door, Witness C confirmed he had stayed with them for a while. He did not remember X or Q ever working for the Flynns. C denied he ever talked to any of the neighbours next door about that night. He seemed to remember that Witness X's daughter was only around 10 years old at the time. C told the Gardaí there was awful gossip going around Clara without me starting it. The Gardaí put to Witness C all the allegations Witness Q had been making. C confirmed Q told him earlier that year that Father Niall's case was being reopened. Q had alleged Witness C told him that someone other than Richard Flynn had violently assaulted Father Niall, which ended up with the coffee table being broken. C would tell the Gardaí his reply to Witness Q was, "I did not say that to you because I would not be a part of that sort of carry-on." He also said that at a later date, Q warned him that the Gardaí could arrive at his house and arrest him. When the Gardaí read one of Witness Q's statements to Witness C, he denied ever telling Witness Q anything mentioned in the statement. He described Q's statement as being absolutely appalling. He insisted that at no time did he witness anyone hit Father Niall. If he had, he told the Gardaí, he could not have just stood by and watched. Witness C was very annoyed at Witness Q for what he claimed in his statement and didn't know why Q would say such things. C went on to deny being told what to write in his original statement by the Gardaí back in 1985. He also denied hearing any member of the Flynn family say that before Richard stood trial, they would be all right because they knew Justice Rowe. He explained that after Father Niall's death, he continued to work for the Flynns for a further 2 years. When he finished working for the Flynns, he remembered they gifted him £500, which he used to buy a new cooker and a fridge. Other than that, he never received any other gifts from the Flynns. Again, he was adamant that he made his original statement without any influence or coercion. Lastly, Witness C told the SCRT that he had received a number of phone calls from a female journalist who, like Witness Q, warned him if he didn't come forward to the Gardaí, he could be arrested. He recalled that she told him the Gardaí in Clara, politicians and the clergy were all corrupt. He remembered she then asked who he voted for. Witness C insisted to this journalist that he would be prepared to go to court to stand over the content of his original statement made in 1985.
2 years into their review, the SCRT continues to interview witnesses. Frustration mounts as the public remains in the dark about which areas of the investigation are being pursued and how much longer the review will take. In Episode 7, the SCRT finally conclude their review and produce a report. The DPP has to decide whether new charges will be brought in relation to Father Niall's death. And the Minister for Justice faces a political dilemma over what to do with the SCRT's report. This series was written, produced and edited by Liv Kerwin. Narrated by Marcus Kerwin. Music, Take Up Your Cross by Onchenko Music. We would like to extend our very special thanks to Mr. Bill Maher and Father Niall's family. This series is dedicated to the memory of Joe, Matthew, and Tony. This has been a Kilcoursey production.